rotating themselves right now. Spectre's gonna be coming in. They're gonna probably be using the dueling rallies to enter in. Oh no!
Oh my god, neglect! And if he's able to get enough, Nump just presses L1 and just destroys the rest of them, giving them the match point. I mean,
oh, but invasion!
But invasion's able to get 3! What's that?
Listen, I feel like these days I start every video by talking about how Overwatch League is right around the corner and it's getting stale, and I know, I'm sorry for that, but man, we are almost 20 days away at this point, and I am honestly so excited to see the Overwatch League make its return. For the past 7 months, every Overwatch League team, new and returning, have been making moves in order to maximize their chances of holding the trophy this summer. However, while the moves may have made sense to them at the time, the outside viewer may not be able to follow the same logic. Every team has some sort of uncertainty to them, and that's what I want to tackle today. In this video, I will identify what I think is the biggest burning questions surrounding every team going into this season, and explain why I think these questions are so pivotal to the success of that team. I will not be answering these questions are questions that I have right now. However, as the season progresses, I will be watching to see how the teams answer these questions. Heck, I may end up making a follow-up video a few months down the line. Anyways, you get the picture. In alphabetical order, these are every Overwatch League team's most burning question going into Season 2. The Atlanta Reign. Can you give Defiant the tools to succeed? It would be very easy for me to compare the Atlanta Reign to the Dallas Fuel, compare Defiant with XQC, and give the XQC situation last year as the reason the Atlanta Reign need to be careful with Defiant in Season 2. And while there are some similarities, the Atlanta Reign are depending on Defiant more than the Fuel ever did on XQC. Yes, the Fuel had XQC, which was a huge deal, and a lot of Fuel fans were also XQC fans. But they also were made from the core of Team Envy, who have a massive following on their own. Seagull, Mickey, Coco, Effect. These are some of the most well-known and well-liked names in Overwatch. Despite all of the drama around XQC last season, the Fuel could always drop him and still land on their feet with all the player and brand recognition that they still have. The Reign don't have that luxury. They aren't comprised of a former team that they can build their brand around. Sure, Pakpo and Dako are well known in Korea, but to a Western audience, by far, the most recognizable name is Defiant. If the way that they handled him in their roster reveal was any indication, Defiant will be a centerpiece of this team's branding and how they expect to gain a lot of their casual fans. That's why it is particularly important for this team to be able to pull off what the Fuel didn't. They're off to a good start by reuniting Defiant with his selfless coach in Sephi. If it works, it could be one of the best pickups this offseason and set up this team for years. If it doesn't, then it could be the cause of a major meltdown that puts the Reign in a very deep hole. The Reign have taken the risk. I hope they made the right choice. The Boston Uprising. Is taken from non-traditional regions worth it? The Boston Uprising have had an interesting offseason. Okay, fine, it was pretty bad. With the accusations that came out about the team and Huck and the whole drama with Toronto Esports, as well as letting go of fan favorites like Striker, Neko, and Mistakes, the Uprising have had a lot to deal with. This would make the Uprising one of the least liked teams by people who didn't live in the area, if it wasn't for a lot of their pickups in the offseason, like Alamau from the South American region and Colorhex from the Australian region, as well as the popular British main tank Fusions. With these pickups, the Uprising have a diversity in their roster that is only really rivaled by the Fusion. Here's the thing though. Did the Uprising pick up these players because they were the best options? Were they picked up for their skill or their coachability? Or was it because they were cheaper, since they came from regions that didn't get as many Overwatch League offers? With all the allegations about the Uprising, this is an unfortunate but plausible theory. We'll see soon if last season was incredible scouting or just some good luck. Bonus, unless the Uprising have 1 or 2 more signings up their sleeve, they went from 3 DPS to start the season to 2, one of which is already banned. Have you learned nothing? Chengdu Hunters. Is it too late for some of these players? The Chengdu Hunters are the second attempt by an Overwatch League team to make a Chinese team work. Unfortunately, the team that got second in the most recent Overwatch World Cup was spread out across the Overwatch League, so the Hunters had to put something else together, and they've had an obvious plan. Miraculous Youngster. This is the team that was considered by most to be the best team in China prior to the Overwatch League, and there was a fair amount of outrage that the Dragons didn't pick them up outright in Season 1. However, the guys at Royal Never Give Up seem determined to get the gang back together. With the recent signing of Jiqiren, the Chengdu Hunters have 3 players who were on Miraculous Youngster, Jiqiren, Yang Jiaolong, and Late Young, as well as their coach RUI, and a talented Taiwanese player in Bacon Jack. It's a great-looking roster. Well, it would have looked great last year. In reality, Bacon Jack and Yang Jiaolong haven't played professional Overwatch since they failed to make Season 1, they had swapped to PUBG. Jiqiren has put together middling performances for Team CC. RUI and Late Young did well at the last Overwatch World Cup, but RUI was also in charge of the Dragons for a while, and, well, he has not won a game in Overwatch League yet. The success of the Chengdu Hunters largely rides on if these players can rekindle that fire that made them so dominant just a year or two ago. Dallas Fuel, what's your plan with the DPS? Actually, I can answer this one myself, they don't need DPS since it's a GOATS meta. But seriously, I am really liking the hybrid direction that the Fuel are taking this team. On tank, OGE was solidifying himself as a top 10 main tank at least by the end of the season, and a lot of people would have put him in the top 5. Partnering him with a great off-tank in RCK is great, and it fills one of the biggest holes that this team had going into the off-season. Unko is a nutty flex support, and adding on an exciting main support like Closer should be great for them. Arrow has proven himself as a head coach, and it'll be fun to see how Jane does on an Overwatch League team for the first time. My only real issue with this team is their DPS. At the moment, the Fuel have 4 DPS players on their roster: AKM, Effect, Taimu, and Zachary. And their past careers, all 4 of these players are most comfortable with playing hit scan roles at the highest level. The Fuel signed Zachary as their flex DPS despite him mostly playing hit scan for Fusion University. And even if that was it, and Zachary is going to be playing flex DPS all the time, we are still looking at 3 other DPS players whose roles tend to overlap with each other pretty heavily, especially AKM and Taimu. If the Fuel can prove me wrong on their DPS selections, it could be very difficult to stop them. The Florida Mayhem. What? Why? I don't really have much else to say. Honestly, people have been digging into the Mayhem left and right, so I won't spend too much time on these guys, but I'll quickly go through the events of the off-season. They got rid of nearly all of their players in Season 1, keeping only Saya player Awesome Guy, who is now SMT, and Tavik. That's fine, I probably would have kept Manitin, but I can see why they felt the need to reset. They hired a bunch of Koreans to replace them. Also fine, but a little weird leaving Tavik alone on this team, unless you account Apply, who was on a 2-way contract. These Korean players are not particularly at the top of most people's scouting boards, like the Dynasty's backup tank in Zephyr and NRG's former main tank Swan. Then, less than a month before the start of the season, the Mayhem fired their only Korean coach, who used to coach 3 of the players on this roster, and replaced them with their contenders coach who, while I'm sure there's reasons for him being there, now has to deal with working with a full team of Koreans, and Tavik. The Florida organization seems to be very confident that they're doing the right thing here, and some things that Swoosh have said about Ryder, maybe they made the right decision there, but I just can't follow the logic overall. Just, why? Guangzhou Charge. Can you successfully blend your cultures together? The Guangzhou Charge have been a very interesting team to watch develop over the offseason. After their performance against the Seoul Dynasty in an offseason show match, many people are putting the Charge down as a sleeper pick to contend this season. While there is a lot of hype around their Metabellum core, as well as their Chinese and English prospects, the Charge have to be careful that divisions don't form. On teams like the Fusion, it's actually quite easy to prevent this, as there are so many nationalities and cultures present that it's impossible for the team to not mingle. However, on a team that is so clearly split, it's easy to retreat with the people that you know are similar to you, and the Charge could easily be 3 separate parts rather than one united team. This is something that they must keep in mind as they start to prepare for this season. Hangzhou Spark. Are you more than just an anime reference? Listen, when I ask a fan of the Spark why they're primarily a fan of the Spark right now, I bet that there would be one of three answers. 60% of the time, they would say they're a fan because they like the pink color scheme. 30% of the time, they would say they're a fan because their logo is an anime reference. The other 10% of the time would be when they actually talk about the team, being a big Gushue fan or liking X6 gaming. The initial marketing strategy for the Spark has worked beautifully and has generated a lot of initial interest, but you have to capitalize on that early in the season before people start leaving for teams that they enjoy more as they continue to watch. A pretty cover does not necessarily make a good book. Now is the time for this team to prove themselves. When people start to talk about this team a month or so into the season, you should talk about how well this team plays together, how they're so much fun to watch, and then say, and they have a pink color scheme, which is cool too. The Houston Outlaws. Have you done enough? The Houston Outlaws remind me of that one SNL Cold Open sketch, except instead of Donald Trump asking Mike Pence what he's accomplished in his presidency so far, it's Flame asking Tyron what they've accomplished this offseason. Tyron clears his throat, looks at his paper, and announces, "We signed Dante," to which Flame responds, "God, I love that list." The Outlaws are obviously very confident in the roster that they have right now, and there's nothing wrong with having confidence in your players. The problem is that, while most other teams were constantly working to get better and bolstering their roster with new additions, the Outlaws looked like they were just twiddling their thumbs. I just haven't seen this team get much better. Even though Dante can fill a big hole on this team, I can't credit them too much for it because it should have happened months ago, and now the heroes that Dante plays aren't played very much anymore. Except maybe Sombra, but Tracer for sure no. I'm worried that over the offseason, other teams were able to pass them up. And if they did, that is a huge problem for the Outlaws. London Spitfire. Are you really that good, or just lucky? Let's clear this up first. I'm not for a second saying that the Spitfire did not deserve to win Overwatch League Season 1. They outplayed everyone in the playoffs and deserved to win that trophy in the end. That being said, their performance in stages 3 and 4 last season didn't seem to suggest the same thing. In fact, it suggested a team on the outs, a team that was simply riding on talent and not much else. It was a whole new Spitfire that came out during the playoffs, and the question is, did the Spitfire really have a breakthrough, or was their success due to adapting to a new meta faster than everyone else? We'll never really know for sure, but I'm expecting for the Spitfire to keep their starting lineup exactly the same as last season. How they perform early on will do a lot to determine the answer to this question. LA Gladiators. How will you handle your life post-Fissure? I'm gonna gloss over this one because I'm expecting most of you know the Fissure Gladiator story by now, but basically Fissure was a main tank that the Gladiators acquired in the middle of last season. Upon joining the team, the Gladiators instantly improved from mid-tier to playoff contenders. It was an incredible turnaround, and because of that, Fissure became a fan favorite and centerpiece of the team. Once the playoffs came around though, Fissure was mysteriously benched. The Gladiators ended up losing the first round of the playoffs, and Fissure was quickly chipped off to the Dynasty. Their replacement, Roar, is a fantastic main tank for Chengdu Panthera, and I'm not denying his abilities at all. But Fissure was such an essential part to this team's story and success that I'm concerned of how the team will be without him again. It's kind of weird when their coach Deepay is on Twitter telling people to lower their expectations and not place the Gladiators so high on their power rankings. Are there issues that we don't know about? The LA Valiant. How will you handle life post-Soon? Yeah, this question is very similar to the Gladiators, but can you blame me? Their biggest stories of their off-seasons have had a very similar beginning, by losing a key piece to their puzzle after a playoff berth. The difference is that while the Gladiators have been working hard to find a replacement that could possibly fill the shoes of Fissure, the Valiant have not. In fact, the Valiant have seemed to make it a point that they don't think they need Soon, by not picking up a single DPS player in the off-season. The Valiant seem to think that KSF or maybe Kareev will be able to do the job just fine. Soon was almost as integral to the Valiant's fanbase as Fissure was to the Gladiators. Hopefully they aren't going to be swapping their DPS players in and out and will be able to find a suitable replacement quickly. Also, it will be interesting to see Izayaki play flex support if the team does indeed end up playing Kareev at DPS. NYXL. Was Flower worth it? This would have been a stupid question to ask last year. Of course Flower is worth it. After the DPS player popped off in the 2017 World Cup, he was one of the most talked about players in the world going into Overwatch League. His abilities would bolster an NYXL DPS line that was already one of the best of the league to unbelievable levels. Unfortunately, Flower was just a little too young for Season 1, so he had to wait until Season 2 to get his chance at the big stage. With that, Flower went down into XL2 to keep his skills sharp. Of course, a talent like him would dominate Contenders, right? Wrong. In Contenders, Flower was massively underwhelming compared to his performance at the Overwatch World Cup, and by the end of Season 2, he was effectively out of the starting lineup for XL2 in favor of Mangachu and Nene. However, considering how quickly Flower was promoted to the main roster in the offseason, it's obvious the NYXL still see potential in him and have a plan for him. I'm not saying that Flower doesn't have potential, because of course he does. Maybe he's just a beast at lands, or he plays better when alongside his LW Blue teammates. But if Flower wasn't Flower, I'd be willing to bet a player who performed like him would still be in Tier 2 right now. Let's hope the NYXL are right on this one. Paris Eternal. Can you make an all-European team work? The Eternal are one of two teams in the Overwatch League who currently do not have a Korean player on their roster, the other being the Hunters. The big thing about the Paris Eternal is that they are the European super team. This is what they've been marketing themselves at for a while. They're obviously targeting the European market in a way that no team ever has before. However, doing so comes at a risk. The Paris Eternal have to be at least okay to start this season. By marketing yourself as Europe's last hope, you're also carrying the hopes of Europe on your back. If you don't live up to those expectations, you will disappoint your region, and also delegitimize it in the eyes of a passive audience. Also, the second you pick up a Korean player, so many of your fans are going to bail on you, saying that you've lost your values or something like that. That can be tough, and it limits a lot of your options to grow. Anyone who says Korea isn't the best region in the world right now is, well, they're just wrong. That is my issue with the Eternal. They've gone all in on Europe, but if it flops, it could flop hard. Philadelphia Fusion. Could you be more consistent? Please? Look, Fusion fans, I get it. You got all the way to the grand finals of Overwatch League Season 1, and that's incredible. You were able to reach a point that many teams were striving for, and upset the Excelsior along the way, which was a nice touch. However, this shouldn't distract you from the fact that you almost didn't get the chance to prove yourselves in the playoffs. Why? Because of playing down to your competition and losing winnable games. Seems to be a trend for sports teams in Pennsylvania. Yes, you can talk about how you beat the Spitfire in the Stage 2 semis, or when you beat the NYXL in the playoffs, but do you remember that time you went to 5 maps against the Dragons? Then do you remember that time it happened again? At their peak, the Fusion can hang with anyone. Problem is, they're not always at their peak. With more competition this season and on a largely unchanged roster, the Fusion need to prove that they can more consistently hit that playoffs form if they want to compete for the title again. The San Francisco Shock. What's your plan? When I think about my worries with the Shock, it essentially boils down to this. The Shock have 11 players on their roster, and frankly I think all 11 of them have a case to be made about why they deserve to be on the starting 6. The DPS get pointed out a lot when talking about this team, because, I mean, look at them. Striker, Architect, Rascal, Sinatra, and Baby Bay, that's a crazy lineup. However, I think the tanks and supports for this team are even more important. I'm talking about the battles between Super and Smurf for main tank, Nevix and Choi Hyobin for off tank, Sleepy and Violet for off support. These all have the common trend of having a Korean player versus a Western player. An honorable mention for this team is, can you keep this team from splitting into 2 teams? Because I have yet to see an example where sectioning a team off by its nationality has worked in the long run. However, with the mess of talented players on this roster and so many different good possibilities, I think the better choice for the question here is to go more broad. I'm excited to see how the Shock work with this roster. If they can make the right choices, this could be the team that we're talking about at the end of it all. Seoul Dynasty. Can you put Lunatic High back on top? The Seoul Dynasty have made a ton of good moves this offseason. I think completely restructuring their coaching staff was a great move for them. I also think they did a good job of filling their biggest holes at main tank with Fissure and at main support with Jesse. I also think that picking up solid depth players with synergy like Marvel and Michelle as the backup tank line is a good move. However, I don't want to talk about the Dynasty's new players. I want to talk about Ryu Jae-hong, Toby, and Zunba. All 3 of these players were legends just last year. All 3 of them being the faces of 3 separate heroes. Ana for Jae-hong, Lucio for Toby, and Zarya for Zunba. However, as Season 1 progressed, all of these players struggled in one way or another, and are not at the peak of the competition anymore. The former Lunatic High core still have tons of potential. We saw flashes of it in Overwatch League Season 1. However, if the Dynasty want to compete for the trophy this season, they must figure out how they can bring Lunatic High back to its former glory. Shanghai Dragons, can you manage a team? I'm not trying to be toxic here, this is my legitimate question. On paper, the Shanghai Dragons have essentially rebuilt from the ground up. They got rid of almost everybody and have replaced them with a lot of very talented players, like 4 players from the Chengdu Panthera team that came in second in Contenders Korea Season 2, and DM, the DPS superstar from Lucky Future Zenith in China. Things are looking great, but we can't distract ourselves from the fact that from a managerial standpoint, the Dragons were an absolute mess all of last season. There were corruption accusations from the very beginning, drama from certain players like Undead that got them removed from the team, and do not get me started with how unprepared this team was to deal with a bilingual situation. At this point, I feel as if the Dragons fans won't have to wait much longer before they get their first franchise win, as long as the team stays out of its own way. Toronto Defiant. Can the whole be better than the sum of its parts? When I look at the players of the Toronto Defiant, all I see is a mixture of mediocrity. To be fair, I did not watch the O2 Ardeon team that 4 of this team's players come from, so I can't be too much of a critic on them, but their results were pretty mediocre. There were arguments to be made about how good Nico and Envy are, and I think those arguments are very valid, but I'm not sure if they're the kind of players that can lift up the team in the same way that Fissure did for the Gladiators and Carpe does for the Fusion. It leads me to an interesting situation because I really do respect Bishop, who was on the London Spitfire for their Stage 1 title, and I think he has a reason for picking the team he did. The Defiant are a sleeper pick this season, but I don't think they have the individual talent to stand up to the best teams in the league. They need to prove that as a team, they can achieve much more than they did as individuals. Vancouver Titans. Can Runaway succeed against the world's best? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I love Runaway's story as much as anyone. It really is a story of someone who had a dream and came up from nothing to become one of the most beloved Overwatch teams in the world. Here's the thing though. Runaway never won anything until Overwatch League had already started. Sure, they got close a few times, but they never won. They were only able to win anything once teams like Lunatic High, LW Blue, and C9 Kongdu were out of the picture. Runaway was simply the best team left, and that might not even be true since they weren't able to win Contender Season 1 and were 1 map away from losing Contender Season 2 as well. I'm just saying that there was a reason that Runaway wasn't picked up to be in Overwatch League Season 1, and I think that may harm this team in Overwatch League Season 2 after they're on the world's biggest stage and up against the world's best competition yet again. The Washington Justice. Can you justify your budget decisions? See what I did there? It kinda sucks that the Justice's offseason has been dominated by budget talks, because if it wasn't for that and the controversy about taking back job offers, I don't think that the Justice would be so low on so many power rankings. I mean, getting players like Janice and Otto are nothing to scoff at, and I can't say I'm not excited to see NA players like Corey and Fozix in the Overwatch League. However, this is the world that we live in, and talk about a small budget plus some of the other members of this team have caused a lot of scrutiny. Justice need to prove that they have made the best possible decisions when building their roster and quick before they lose the support of the fans that they already have. And that'll do it for today. What do you guys think are the biggest questions facing the Overwatch League teams going into Season 2? If you have a different question that you think I missed, let me know in the comments, and if I think it's a good one, I'll give it a heart. If you like this video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I make competitive Overwatch content every week, and I think you'll want to keep tabs on this channel, especially with Overwatch League Season 2 right around the corner. Until next time though, that's all from me. Don't get tilted.